Hey, what's going on, y'all? We're back with another stream. And this time I got 7 Club again. And you know what? This is a blessing for you guys because we recorded a podcast 2 weeks ago and we went to go check the results and it did not record on my end anyways. So we're going to do it live like Bill O'Reilly. We'll do it live. So welcome to the show, 7 Club. Welcome back.
Hey, JT, thanks for having me, man. We had a good time 2 weeks ago, and we're going to have a good time again. It's always great talking with you, man, and your people here on your YouTube channel. My mom might be in the chat, so you guys say hi to her. And you're awesome, dude. Always love your work, so it's always a joy to hang out with you.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. Likewise, obviously, I wouldn't. You're a returning guest. That means obviously it means I liked you. The stuff you've been sharing, I said, it's interesting. I think the last time you were on, we briefly touched on like the short season, idea that we're possibly in, the eschatology in the Bible, that we're past the millennial reign. And it sounded like it was almost like the first time you ever heard it when you were on here last time. But now you're starting to, like with the videos you're making, it kind of seems like it's starting to maybe draw into this idea that, it could work and this makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility, especially with getting into this discovery with this map here. The kind of roads intersect there a little bit, I've noticed. So, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things about this. Like this theory here with the moon map, also, it was something that resonated with me. So from when I first saw it, but I didn't have enough information, didn't quite dip my toes in. But then here recently, I just decided, I'm going to see if I can get a couple questions that I have answered through this map and see if it makes sense to me. And if things continue to make sense, just like the flat earth, I researched it for 2 years and then finally said, okay, I'm 100% a flat earther. So it's like, I'm kind of on that with some of these new things that are coming up. It's like, until they just fall flat and prove themselves wrong somehow, then I'm open to it, So as of now, these things are swirling right now and getting big in the airwaves as well. A lot of people are resonating with it, and I've got some new discoveries and even one more new thing since I saw you last that I think you'll find interesting too.
Interesting. So yeah, I guess I think that's the way to present it. I mean, that's how I kind of view a lot of things now. It's like, I feel like I'm kind of on the slower side to adopt to conspiracies. And I think sometimes people get mad at me over here because I'm like, oh, you don't believe that, right? I was like, no, I need evidence to believe lots of things. I mean, I'm open to the possibility of lots of things, but, it takes me a while to get over it because I think I am analytical, like I do have, like, it has to make sense to me, and I'm open to the idea. If it doesn't contradict the Bible, if it contradicts the Bible, full stop, done. No, I'm not. I don't even want to hear anymore. If it doesn't, I'm open to the idea that it could be true. But I think this is exciting because this opens up a possibility of, when you do accept biblical cosmology, one of the first questions everyone always asks, or like the people who are skeptics say, well, why would they lie? And I think it's great when you can kind of like present, what about this? If this is a possibility, this is an excellent reason why they would lie. And it does open up, no pun intended, a whole new world of possibilities, maybe multiple worlds of possibilities.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and accept the pun. I like that.
Yeah. So a la Aladdin.
If we want, I can pull up the slides and we can do what we did last time, just kind of flip through them and talk a little bit and get some conversations going and things.
Yeah, I'll stop mine. So this is my version of, guys. Obviously, if you can see the thumbnail I made. So yeah, if you guys aren't familiar, we got the moon map here, and then so a lot of this is going to correlate with the Prague clock. And if you see what's going on with the Prague clock, like that's sort of what this theory, like if you guys, I've kind of hinted at this for a while, or I've touched on this topic, but yeah, 7 Club is really going to go in depth on here. So I'll let him have the floor here.
Cool. So let's see. Last time we had a little bit of a issue getting it pulled up. but I think I had to close the window, then open it back up here. Let's see. All right, now.
Now, if you want to present on Riverside anything with sound, you have to have it in the same browser tab. Like it has to be in the same kind of browser. But if it doesn't have sound, then you can kind of pull it up any different way.
Let's see. I don't think I need sound, but let's see. Cancel. Come back. Okay, let's see if this works. Do you only see folders, or did the other thing open?
No, I only see a picture. Like it looks like little files. So they're not open yet.
Okay, let's see. I gotta close everything, then open it back up. Now let's see if it works. Sorry for the delay, everybody. Okay, here we go. Now we're on. See the AE map?
Yes, I see it. We got vid.
So here's the AE map, the flat Earth map that we all got, and it's the truth. I mean, we've discovered that, or else we wouldn't be flat earthers. We've seen the measurements of the Earth. We've studied, the movements of the sun and moon. We've pretty much said, okay, this makes sense. But I saw this for the first time not too long ago, and I thought it was interesting. And a lot of people throw this out immediately because they're like, well, yeah, that does kind of look like, Earth and land, but that doesn't look like the map we've been given exactly. But, who's to say that they're not, maybe being a little shady about the perfect shapes of our continents,
Well, we already know that the proportions of the continents change from map to map. I mean, they're not consistent at all. That's why, like, you see Greenland in some maps is as big as all of North America, and sometimes it's small. Sometimes it looks like it's as big as Africa. And when you actually hear like the actual dimensions of Africa versus Greenland, no, they're not close to the same. But Africa is obviously way bigger, way bigger.
Right. And when people say, oh, the Gleason map, it has distortions, the scale's wrong. It's like, okay, we have one map where the scale's wrong, and you have every other map where it's not perfect. So it's like, yeah, everything's imperfect pretty much. So what would be more perfect than a reflection if that's what it was? Again, we don't know yet, but in 1964, this is the new thing I was wanting to show you. Found this article, and it's an old 1964 article a guy put out. Says, moon, a mirage, reflection of Earth's surface, contends Monroe man. So this guy had a theory, and he put it out. You guys can find this if you just type in moon, a mirage, reflection of Earth's surface. And it's a neat little article. Now, the guy believed in the globe when he put this out, but his theory was that the moon was a reflection of Earth. And I don't think that's the same guy that thought the moon was plasma, but that was another theory that came out around that time. Then what happened? Next thing you know, we're landing on the moon, right? Supposedly. So it makes you wonder, like, were people in that time kind of getting on to the true nature of this Earth, maybe getting back to biblical cosmology, starting to look into things, realizing these cults had come up with a completely wrong model of Earth, and maybe they were starting to investigate things, and then the moon landing happened. Who knows?
Well, right. Well, or it's the possibility that there's people who obviously already know that no, we don't believe that, and maybe there's some earnest scientists who are going with the data they're presented, and they're actually going look, and they're declaring the results, and maybe that was before you could get completely drowned out by mainstream academia, or you just get completely just run out of it.
Yeah,
like that guy probably probably didn't get any more grants after he presented that idea.
Yeah. And nowadays it's so hard to get anything out there that's if you have any merit, it's like people pretty much control your press. So if you are one of the frontline physicists or scientists out there, you've got a team who control your PR, your public relations, what you're going to say, on camera and all of that. And the people who found soft tissue and dinosaur bones, so to speak, same thing happened to them. They got docked, they got shut up and whatever else. And in some cases, people, don't live to tell about it much longer in some cases. But this map came about, and you've seen this one as well. This one I liked because it's got, the moon, and it has our known land here kind of marked out more. And I like the coloring and the, the tropics. The 2 tropics are on there, which is really neat. And this is the one that really hit me because I started to zoom in on these other things. And right here, it's kind of neat because we have this in the center of that showing a true north, I guess. And this is just like the clock in Prague, and it's showing a little arrow pointing that this is circling around. And I watched a video today that was saying this thing would take 20-something thousand years to get all the way around, which is just a speculation. But what would you think?
Well, I think what they would. I remember hearing this before, and they were saying to get a I forgot what they called it, a grand year or something like that. To get like the all the Earth ages as far as the 12 signs of the zodiac to get all the way back to the right one. It was supposedly like 26,000 years.
That's what it was.
Ish. And yeah, so I think that they say each zodiac age would be 2,160 years. So you go from that's why you go from Pisces perhaps into Aquarius. That would be a different age. You know what was crazy? I shared something on my Instagram page last week, and it was showing the average height of the Antarctic continent, the ice wall, and the average height. Check this out. It was 2,160 meters. And I was like, that's weird that it's the exact same as a precession of the equinox.
Oh,
I said, that's pretty weird, right? I mean, that's kind of a big coincidence.
It's kind of like God's perfect geometry. So these things
could be, or they could be lying about both of them, because I have no idea. Like, how would anyone really know? Like, who would live to tell if it took that long to get through each age? What's also interesting is what people don't actually realize is they divide up like the Mazzaroth or the zodiac based on 12 different signs, but they're not all the same size. So like some of them would take longer to get through, and some of them obviously would be shorter. So maybe that's the average is 2,160 years.
That is true. First glance on this, when I was looking at this guy, all the ice, it looks like everything's Iceland, except for where our sun and moon are. Now, if this thing is moving, this is the moment of honesty I had to have with myself. I'm like, okay, so if this is true, then we'd have to see some evidence. We'd have to see, for one, our sun, as it moves through our 2 tropics, it would have to be slowly but surely moving in this direction, right? Meaning that this side of Antarctica would have to be melting, right? And then this side over here would have to be constantly freezing. Also, the land that's right next to Antarctica. So South America would have to be getting cooler weather, in its southern tip region. It'd have to be getting cooler weather. I didn't even check this tropic, but same thing with this tropic. That's yet to be looked into even. But I did look on this side of this tropic, on Africa, because I was thinking, okay, the Sahara Desert would have to be getting direct sunlight further south. If it was slowly moving that way, the Sahara Desert would have to be, growing. And then also, down here melting. The pole would have to be moving, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. But the narrative is that our North Pole is moving. They say it's moved over, 1,000 years, and it's moving faster today than it was a decade ago, even, along with those other places that need to be freezing and melting and all of this. And when those things started lining up, I was like, huh, you know, because a lot of that stuff is I mean, they point to climate change for that, right? They're like, oh, it's climate change. And then for the North Pole moving, they say, oh, it's a pole shift. We're in the middle of a pole shift is what they say. They say the pole shift is happening now. They're like, it's started and we're in it, right? So when all of those things lined up, I was like, okay, now we're onto something. So the center of this, I started noticing each center that's on any of these maps that people draw up, and I always wonder who made these. You know, I need to find who made some of these maps, but they have this true north center, and it's got the black center, and then these 4 lines, these 4 what look like the 4 rivers,
Right.
coming out. This one as well, and then you pointed out last time we talked, this next map right here, that means black sun, right?
Oh yeah, that's there's the black sun, the Rupus, or that's is that the Rupus Negro? Is that where the center of the black? I mean, like that's literally where Black Rock comes from, like the company name, or allegedly it might come from that. Probably though.
I believe it does. It hits when I hear that, it hits my soul. You know, I feel it in my spirit that they're paying homage to that. And of course, the names of these things, Sirius, you know, that's a name of a star as well. This black cube here, so there's symbolism. Oh, and I wanted to point out too, back here when we look at this, first of all, there's a lot of these little symbols here, which, you know, look like swastikas, which we'll get into that. But over here, do you see that little shape there? The Masonic square and compass shape?
Yeah, I do see that.
And then the people who, you know, I've seen that Masonic person who was a whistleblower. They didn't show their face, but they drew the model of the Earth on that whiteboard, and that reminds me of that. You know, they do share that knowledge, and the higher ups, I'm sure they trade the knowledge that they don't want us normies to have. So
yes,
if anyone does know about this and this were true, I would say they'd cover it up, and I would say they would give us partial truths like they do with everything. So it's just like the flat earth movement that's happening right now. It could be just a partial truth of what they really don't want us to figure out, you know?
Well, yeah, the symbols are obviously the language of the mysteries, and they don't pick those symbols because they're Masons. They draw with a compass, and they use a square to make it straight. I mean, come on, guys. Like that's what I said. Once you kind of like look into the little season and the Freemasonry stuff, we're told that they built all these grand buildings. I don't believe they did anymore. I think they took credit for it.
Right. They just came up on this land, gave us our little history lesson in school, told us a story, and tried to take credit for all those buildings. You look at those things today and you're like, you look at the old pictures and you see the horse and buggy next to them and you're thinking, okay, okay, come on. And you mentioned the clock in Prague. This is what hit me too. Like as I just started kind of looking into it, it reminded me of the clock of Prague, that little image, because it had this, you know, smaller circle in the bigger circle. So I went back and looked at the clock in Prague, and I didn't even notice this before, but I noticed looking back at it that the sun and moon, they're connected right here in the center of this wheel of zodiac. And right. I just assumed, you know, from looking at it from back here, you're not really paying much attention. I didn't notice that at first. And then now seeing it, I'm like, okay, so this sun and moon isn't even going around the entirety of the clock. There's more to this. There's something going on here. And you mentioned the 12, you know, zodiacs. And what if an age is when it's touching the outer edge? You know, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's what we're said to be, there's a precession of the zodiac, and the zodiac is turning as obviously the sun and the moon are spinning on their circuits. So I guess the really thing that really only changed, I mean, probably the most important part for us is the center point of the circuit of the sun. I think that's kind of what we're getting at. You know, it's interesting. So I just looked it up. I never really looked into this. the clock in Prague supposedly was built in the 15th century. I mean, like, think about this this crazy, complex clock built in the 15th century. Like 1410 is when they say. I mean, you guys got to really think about that. It's like when you think about like how primitive our ancestors were, and they were building something so complex like this complex machinery, and then they act like they didn't have the kind of tools that could build grand buildings. They had something, guys. Like that's a complex machine.
It is. And the Antikythera mechanism, it doesn't work for them in their narrative when they give us this narrative that in the 15th century we were basically still dragging our knuckles on the ground,
Mhm.
pretty much. And then there's complex computers. Like this is a computer pretty much. And the Antikythera mechanism was a computer, and it was very advanced. It was a geocentric astronomical calculator. It calculated the moon cycles, the eclipses, the motion of all the celestial bodies, and it did it in precision. And to think, that we had nothing. And then the technological boom that happened from 1960 till today is really weird too, don't you think?
Oh, not just 1960. I mean, not 1960, probably like 1860. Because if you
Yeah.
think they went from, well, we're taught that they didn't have cameras before the early, like 1820-ish. And then, I think around 1860 something that they invented the car. And if you believe the narrative, I think, well, maybe it's like 1850. If you believe the narrative, they went from horse and buggies to the moon in like just over 100 years. I mean,
Oh.
that's what we're told. I mean, so, but the thing is, if you could build a clock that's that precise, like with all the different calculations that would have to be involved in this and all the knowledge of all the other things in order for this to work properly. And obviously, if you look at that thing, it's obviously geocentric, just the way it's looked. And we're told that they made this clock in the dark ages, right? Because this would have been 1410 would have been in the dark ages. It wasn't dark, guys. It was not dark.
And when's the can we find out when the telescope was supposedly invented? Because if this and the Antikythera mechanism are were both created before a telescope was, then we're definitely being. I mean, we already know we're not being told the truth, but I mean, how could they even hold that one up? I mean, when do they say it was?
Okay,
invented?
the telescope was invented in 1608. So 200 years after this was invented, basically.
Makes no sense.
No, it's a lie. I mean, I think it's well, I mean, the thing is like, but the knowledge of the stars, the moon and the sun, this earth, obviously think about cartography going way back, all the knowledge they had of like the Dendera zodiac. There's debates on how old it is. I think the probably the most moderate estimates is it's 2,000 years old. Many people think it's more like 4,000 years old. And again, that's one of the things that probably got me closer to biblical cosmology. It was like right away when I was like, okay, so Genesis 1:14 says God put the stars, the sun, the moon, and the stars in the sky for signs, one, for was it seasons, two, days, and years. Okay, so signs is the first thing he says. And so I believe obviously signs and seasons going together, that's what the zodiac's telling you the time of the year it is when it goes around. Yeah. So you think about it, if they had the same constellations back in ancient Egypt as we have now, it only works if we're not moving, and they are. Like, so those things remain constant. There's no different perception of like the closeness and furthest of one that's further away. Like they would be obviously be changing when you see like the curly cues, all the things they're doing at one time, going unfathomable speeds that we could, like I said, literally you can't fathom how fast they're saying it's going. They would change, and they have not changed in human history.
Right. It's a good observation. That is true. 100%. I'm with you. And geocentrism just makes more sense. You know, the crazy thing about it is, like, modern day, they give us the heliocentric model, which was, I believe, sorcery. I think it was mathematical magic that they used. They took what they already knew, they used mathematics, they reverse engineered it, they turned it into something that's honestly complicated. You know, it's complicated and complex. And they say, oh, this was to simplify things. You know, this was to simplify it and make, you know, the Copernican theory, it makes more sense. But really it doesn't, because since the beginning of time, you know, as man watched the stars, you know, God, I believe, gave them the ability to even understand what was going on. You know, it's like you're standing here from a geocentric perspective. This is the intuitive, the practical way to think about the world. Is here you stand in the center, right here on Earth. You look up and you watch the wandering stars move above you, and
Mm-hmm.
you predict based off of that. Predictions were made long before a globe was invented and all these other things. So it just takes real jumping through hoops, real mental gymnastics to get people to believe that the heliocentric model is more intuitive and more uh, simple. It's really not. It's wild. It's wildly
Well,
complex compared to the geocentric.
well, I think that, like, kind of what you're saying, I think that what makes sense to me is that it's purposely complex because all the science is, trust me, bro, you guys are too stupid to figure this out. We need really smart people to tell you what's up, right? So in the biblical model, and obviously what's in our own eyeballs, empirical evidence, you can go outside and on a clear night, you can kind of recognize the same kind of constellations. You would notice them every year. And obviously being observant of the environment around you. And you think about, like, the times where you would have needed to know the solstices, you would have needed to know when the constellations were in there, because it has stuff to do with when you plant your crops and all the things, right? So, like, that's important for you to know that. And but now, obviously, as we sit on our rear ends more and we sit in cubicles and we go, we don't worry about planting crops. We go to the grocery store. So to me, it's obviously back in the days when you were relying on God to send the rains, when to plant the crops, all of the things you needed to do. That was what you're supposed to do. And I think that now you have all this complexity. And I think that's what people have. A lot of people would say people are stupid. I don't think people are dumb, but I think that they are willfully ignorant and they're
Mm.
fearful of looking dumb. So they don't ask questions. They don't try to answer, because that's what I said, most of the time, like, when people's journey to biblical earth is just asking questions. And sometimes it might be a stupid question because there's an obvious answer. But what's worse than a stupid question is not knowing the answer to a very simple question, and being afraid to ask. Like you said, I'm just like, you don't have to say, I'm just trying to get there. Just help me understand it. And I think that's when the answer is math, it's kind of almost like, all right, you got to show me. And they won't be able to show you.
Yep. And Einstein, everybody's calling Einstein the smartest man ever, and he's got the theory of gravity. But when I sat and thought about that too, I'm like, okay, so the standing theory of gravity is the bending and warping of space-time. And I was thinking, is space-time this special thing? They don't literally mean space and time, do they? But it's like, that's another one of those things, like you said, where they're like, just sit down, let the geniuses of history figure out the physics here. It's the bending and warping of space-time. It's too complicated, but how can space and time? Space is just the empty area right here between my hands. It's literally nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then time, which is just a construct developed off of the sun's position relative to you and me or wherever, 12 o'clock, sun's right above us. So how can those two things, an idea and empty space, be fused as a fabric that pulls to the center of Earth? It's like when you think about it, it really makes no sense at all.
No,
And
it does not. Like I said, it's literally trust me. Like trust me, it works.
Yep.
And I think that that's unfortunately people do. And I think that, like you said, they have a model. And I believe that what the thing that people don't know is people like Copernicus and Isaac Newton, they were reading like sacred Egyptian texts to get their knowledge of the cosmos. And obviously that's soul centric. It's centered on Ra, the sun god. And so I think that's what people don't understand. Yeah. So before they figured all these things out before they ever had a spaceship to go up to go witness it all. So where did they get it from? They got it from books too. So if your Bible says that God made the sun and the moon and the stars on like day 4, not on day 1, made light first, then this contradicts that. And so I said, I really do believe that as Christians, you're giving more weight to Isaac Newton and these alchemists' sacred texts over the Holy Scriptures when you do that. And they don't know that because they think it's based on math and science and spaceships and space shuttles and all this kind of stuff, but it's not.
Yep. When you really narrow it down, that stuff's more of a religion than just believing the oldest history book, And people's like, the Bible's not a science book. But the Bible has a ton of science in it, and it's accurate. You know what I mean?
Well, the Bible's either true or it's not. I mean, it might not be a science book, but the things in it, are they true or are they not true?
Right. Exactly. Like I always thought the mixing of fabrics thing was fascinating to me. Like, we drink alkaline water, right? Like alkaline's good for us. Alkalines in batteries. It's like, we get static charge in our bodies. The sun has like, it gives us vitamin D, but it also, I believe, charges us up. It feels like you feel much better when you're out in a day in the sun of God's natural light.
For sure.
But like they make these shoes with soles made of rubber, and if you go out and ground, it actually helps your health benefits and things like that. But like with the wool thing, I always thought that scripture was just one of those tough rules, the wool and linen, but if you mix those fabrics, wool has a frequency of 5,000, linen has a frequency of 5,000. If you wear just one of those, it actually raises yours,
right?
And it has health benefits. But then if you wear them together, it cancels that out to 0. So then now you're walking around basically blocked, I guess. I mean, I guess that's what that would do, but it lowers the health benefits of that static charge and stuff, which I need to look more into that and learn more about it. But I just found that was a fascinating thing, that back then, the prophets were told certain things that maybe didn't make sense to us until we really looked into it. But
God's got
reasons. Feel like, right. And I don't even need to know those reasons, Well,
I do think it's cool because I think most people have wondered that, because there's certain things with the old law that are just like, what? Why would God care what kind of mixed fabric? I got this tri-blend shirt on, right? Like, or something. It's comfortable. Like, why would it matter? And then I did see a video probably last year saying exactly that like a lot of these blends, like, you get like a Nike shirt and it's literally like this super low, horrible, frequency, which, like I said, seems weird, the fabrics, before you learn this stuff, they have that. But yeah, it was completely fascinating to me that, yeah, those two particular, wool and linen, that are mentioned specifically, I believe, in the book of Leviticus, saying don't mix them together. Yeah, like God had, like, obviously, how the accuracy of the Bible when it comes to stuff like that, like, how would they know that?
Right.
But for God, right. But literally, Moses spoke face to face with God, and then he got this message to God's people. I think that's pretty awesome.
It is. It makes you want to trust even the seemingly silly things. It makes you want to trust it. Fasting, I've been we both have been looking into demonic parasites lately, and fasting can help get rid of parasites, and, of course, there's the symbolic spiritual side of fasting, relying on God and putting physical needs behind you and spiritual needs in front of you, and, trusting him, leaning on him, obviously. But then also there's the physical benefits of fasting, ridding toxins, ridding parasites, things like that. So it's like, how many more of those things are we overlooking that we're now figuring out actually have more scientific, real science, the real testable, repeatable, provable, demonstratable things to do with it. Because I think modern science, I always call it man's imperfect conclusion of God's perfect creation. I think these men, they in quantum physics as well, they look down as far as they can to try to find, the building blocks of creation.
The God particle.
Right. CERN, God particle. Yeah. They go and try to find that and then slap an anti-God label on it and say, oh, I know it looks like this. I know it looks like this was intelligently designed and there's a mind behind this and a creator behind this, but there's this scientific explanation we want to give you that takes him out of the equation because they're prophets of science, which I do believe 100%. Is a religion.
100%. Well, that was funny because I made that video this past week, and it kind of relates to this, where I thought the movie The Prestige, I was going to bring this up, is what's interesting about that movie. I particularly pointed out the whole mockery of the Last Supper at the Olympics, which I thought was interesting about that is you have this thing, like the steps of the magic trick. One thing, you present something that's normal, and then you make it disappear, and then you make it reappear, and that's like the steps of the thing. And he's basically saying like how you won't want to, you look to see the secret of the trick, but you won't see it because you really actually don't want to see it. You're really not actually looking because you want to be tricked. And so I thought what was interesting about that movie was that's what the magicians were there to do. The magicians actually didn't do any like real quote unquote magic. That was the magic. The magic was changing people's minds, changing their consciousness. And I think that's literally like the Crowleyan method of magic. But then you had in the movie Tesla. And so what Michael Caine's character was saying, that guy's a real wizard. And when you actually see when they start, I think there's a very interesting scene between Hugh Jackman and David Bowie, who's playing Tesla. And he's like talking about the machine he wants him to make. And he's like, have you considered the cost? And Hugh Jackman's a wealthy man at that point. And he's like, it doesn't matter. Money doesn't matter. And he's like, no, have you considered the cost? And he starts to go into basically how much this is like his ambition and his obsession with this had consumed him. And you can very clearly see that he's talking about demons. Like that he's, and that's, if you know the story of Tesla, he supposedly got his inventions, which whether like a lot of the stuff with the Tesla stuff is very fishy too. He like, I don't know how many patents, it was like 300 patents. He was inventing millions of things basically. But if you believe the story was, he was basically getting the idea from machines in his brain and then through dreams. And then he was just going out and drawing them the next day. Guys, that's not normal. That's not just genius. That's like, he was a muse, if that's what they're saying. And then if you know the rest of the story, he dies penniless, like he weighed hardly anything. And yeah, I just think it's interesting. So the point being was that Hugh Jackman gets Tesla's machine and then he takes it to this theater and he shows the one guy, the theater owner, hey, look, here's this machine. And when the theater owner sees the trick, he knows it's real. And you can see he's like, it's been a long time since I saw real magic. And I thought one of the interesting parts of the movie was when he says, basically dumb it down, make it look like a trick because it's too good. So it was the role of the magician to cover up real wizardry with the illusion to make it palatable. And okay, so now you talk about CERN, and then you see all the demonic looking imagery with Shiva, the Apollyon temple, the 3 6s in the logo. all the weird things about CERN. Is it possible that they are doing something that's like literally satanic, and the white lab coats are the magicians who are literally just kind of the face of it to cover it up, to make it palatable for a science-y public?
Yeah, I believe so, man. And even magicians, like, you got to admit, you've seen some tricks where you're like, okay, there's no explanation for that. How did they do that? You know, and these white lab coat CERN people, some weird things have happened. You know, I was real into the Mandela effect for a while, and I was rabbit holing. So I looked up all the dates of when they fired up that particle collider thing. And the dates that they did it were right on dates where some of the bigger Mandela effects had been noticed, you know, like the Monopoly one, you know, the actual Mandela one, when Nelson Mandela, the very first one, they actually did collide particles back then. That was the first time that they fired up their particle collider, was back in the around that time that Nelson Mandela was in prison. So it's like, I do think that there's witchcraft going on there, and you can kind of see through their little seances and their little things that they do, their dances and things. It just feels and looks demonic, man.
Yeah, you know, we should probably get back to the the four quarters. So it's interesting. I'll set this up. If I don't know if people are to go back just to kind of to summarize a little bit. So we believe in biblical cosmology. The sun and the moon run on a circuit, and you can look this up. Obviously, there's a bunch of verses we could draw from. I know in Psalm 19 it talks about the circuit of the sun. So the circuit would be, obviously it's going in a wheel around. And so what I find fascinating, what doesn't get talked about enough. So the science would say that all the planets, the sun, the moon, the earth too, move based on gravity. But I find it fascinating that we have a magnetic North Pole. And so if you think about that, what the biblical cosmology and most of us believe that this place probably runs on electromagnetism. And so if you think about the sun moving on this circuit, and then literally the science is saying, as Seven Club mentioned earlier, the poles are moving. So if you think about that, like, now let's kind of overlay what they said on this model. That would mean the circuit of the sun is actually moving, probably because maybe that magnetic North Pole, which is maybe is the rock, or maybe it's what's under that area of the earth, could be what's actually shifting, and it's taking the sun and the moon on its circuit and it's shifting it around a broader plane. Because if you see what he's showing on this map, is there's an inhabitable earth where if we can only inhabit the part where the sun moves, because we need light, we need heat, because everywhere else outside of the circuit, at least from as far as we know, would be dark and it would be freezing cold. So, and it's surrounded by an ice wall. Of course, in this model, Antarctica is not just a hunk of land; it's literally an ice wall. We're not saying there's not land under it in parts, but in this model, literally you have a wall of ice that surrounds the circuit. Of course, because the sun doesn't move; it only moves inside of this area. Now, here's the crazy part: is as the sun moves, the ice wall, unless the sun's circuit gets bigger, it remains the exact same size, but it's shifting around a broader plane of the earth that is much bigger. And so there, as it does, there's possibilities of land being exposed as ice melts. So I'll let you have the floor, so as people, to catch people up.
Absolutely. Good description. And yeah, so that's exactly what I had to have answered when I looked at this. I said, okay, so if this is true, you know, if the clock in Prague is really a depiction of our true Earth that not a lot of people know, I mean, we know this part. There's got to be a few things that have to be happening. So one, like you said, the ice would have to be melting as the sun's making its way this way. The Antarctica ice would have to be melting in West Antarctica. So it would have to be freezing in East Antarctica. And then you find out that's exactly what it's doing. And this is how they divide the lands. This is West Antarctica and this is East Antarctica. They divide it right down the center. So there isn't a North and South Antarctica, you know what I mean? Because all it really is East and West. And the neat thing is, as this side freezes, which would be this rim over here, this whole side, right? As it freezes, elevation changes. So if you look at the different elevations in Antarctica, like there's an overall elevation, there's an average elevation, and then Antarctica itself is the highest overall elevation in our known land, in our known Earth. And it would kind of have to be, you know, because it's the border of the waters, right? So all the water's holding in. So Antarctica is the highest spot. But then also look how the elevation is changing here on the side that's getting less sunlight. It's getting higher and higher. And over here where it's getting more sunlight, it's getting lower and lower and melting, they say, which they give all credit to climate change. Now, this center map here, you know, I liked this, but the thing that confused me was none of the land looked familiar to me. I didn't know what this land was, you know, and it's got the mountain in the center, right? And then when you go back and look at these maps and some of the depictions of them, it's got that same kind of little body of land with the black in the center and those four little things. And I found that to be interesting. So what if the Mercator is the true north center of this bigger land? That was a question I asked myself. And what do you think? What does that make sense that could be a possibility?
Absolutely. I started to think that because I was saying that I thought it's interesting that on old maps you see stuff like this, but when you see, and I'm not going to say that I believe Google Earth, but I mean modern maps now have nothing there, and so there it's based on this idea of where the North Pole is, probably the way the maps are shown. But yeah, like if the Earth is much bigger than that, the water and the land goes out much further, then yeah, we're not talking about north as much as we're talking about center. Because obviously there's, in this model, you know, it's only north every direction if you're on a ball. It's the top. But if this is a broad plane, it's really we're just talking about the center of it. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense in the idea that yeah, why would they try to protect Antarctica so much? Because a lot of people see, this is what a lot of flat earthers have said at the beginning, and they could be correct, that you could get so close to the dome, you basically could just go out and you could just touch the glass, or you could touch the clear, blue crystal at the dome. But in this model, it's really not, they're not trying to protect the dome. They're trying to protect what's on the other side of the ice or under the ice, which could be these lands. And I think that makes sense, because why else would they care? They wouldn't be trying to protect the glass. I don't think they would even care about that. Maybe they would because they wouldn't want us to know. But yeah, like basically you would have to go to the eastern part in order to get
it would
to
just
where
be one little area that would
you could
have
get
it, you know?
you could get close to the edge in this model. And this, again, at the same time, look, I'm even saying that, let's just say that the moon map is a reflection of the Earth. What if the Earth is way bigger than even that? You know what I'm saying? Like that the moon could not reflect all of it, because the moon's not big enough to reflect all of the Earth. So it could only be reflecting a small part of it, because, you know, biblically too, it mentions how the ends of the earth and how far the land goes. And it mentions like the way it could almost be endless from our perspective. If you look up and see the heavens thinking that's endless, the earth is probably just as big under it. So that's a possibility too, that maybe maybe that edge is not actually the edge of any kind of the firmament or anything.
Absolutely. So I started this little deal calling it 4 quarters because this is about 1/4, you know. So I was saying 4 quarters, and I was just looking into different things that called 4 corners or 4 quarters of the world. And, you know, through several cosmological and mythological systems, they portray it as 4 quarters or 4 quadrants of Earth, which some people say it's north, south, east, and west. But this was weird how it's sectioned. You know, that's not section north, south, east, and west. That's section quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, you know. But this was interesting as well. You know, Enoch talking about the 4 quarters. It's Jeremiah 49:36, 4 quarters of heaven, so the heavens as well, 4 quarters of the land, 4 quarters of the earth, in a bunch of scriptures. Definition of quarter is not only a 1/4 of something, but it's also the place in which you dwell. You know, the quarters, come into my quarters and hang out with me.
Right.
You know, clocks seem to have 4 quarters as well, and we live on a clock. We got Uriel. Is Uriel mentioned outside of Enoch once in the?
Well, I mean, if you look biblically, the only 2 angels that are ever mentioned by name are Michael and Gabriel. None of the other ones are ever mentioned. I think that's sort of weird, but yeah.
Well, for you guys, Uriel was.
Well, put it this way: that's in the canon of scriptures. I believe. Yeah. I want to say that Uriel is mentioned. He might be in the book of Second Esdras, I think. Also.
Yeah. Uriel was like Enoch's personal messenger. That hung out with him, right?
Well, I think at some point he's escorting Enoch around. Yeah. I think that those are obviously clearly really like real angel names. I think we can kind of trust on that.
Yeah, for sure. So this was I searched 4 quarters, and this image popped up, and I just liked kind of looking at this because some of it I have no clue what it is, but you know, different
somebody does.
zodiacs, obviously. But I guess that's Sagittarius, that's Capricorn, that's Aquarius, that's Scorpio, Asher Balanca. See, I don't know what that one is.
That looks like kind of like Libra with the scales.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Virgo, Leo. There's the crab.
Yeah, Gemini, Cancer, Gemini,
Taurus,
Sagittarius.
Pisces.
Yeah, what was interesting, I was saying that this makes sense also when we were talking last time. If you guys have watched The Lost History of Flat Earth, and it mentions that our maps are inaccurate because that if you guys look this up, you guys can go on to Wikipedia or any kind of source. We know Wikipedia is not the best source, but they would say that the tropics were designated in the age of Aries. So when Jesus was born, they were moving into the age of Pisces, which I said I don't think it's a coincidence that there's the Jesus fish, Pisces is the fish, but the crazy part is the tropics never change, and I think so. We have the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. So in the age of Pisces, the tropics would have changed based on like this celestial navigation, and it would have been, I think, Sagittarius and Gemini would have been the 2 tropics. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's what it was, Gemini and Sagittarius. So that's crazy. I mean, if you think about it, so like for 2,000 years, and so what we're led to believe is we're either at the very end of Pisces or we're actually moved out of Pisces into Aquarius. And all the maps during that whole time never had the proper tropics. And this is when they would have supposedly needed it, because we're told before they weren't sailing across the ocean blue before 1492. And we know that's inaccurate. But the point is that it makes no sense that they would not have changed that when, that's when we would have been told they needed to navigate based on the stars in those times.
Have you made a video on that? What you're talking about right now?
Basically, I cut a reel when I talked about it one time when I was saying that there's. It was funny. I was just saying, I was like, this is a we've got them situation, because I said that there is no reasonable explanation why they would not have fixed that. So I said, you have two options.
Right.
The maps are really old. The maps are old. Like they're literally old enough to be the time before Jesus, which that would have so many more questions with that. Because if you think about it, so how would they get somewhat accurate cartography back in them days, in the days before Jesus, because that's when the maps would have been made with those tropics. And then the other question would have been, what happened to the maps after that? And which I think is sort of fascinating when you consider this theory, is that if we moved into a different age, like even think about when in Matthew 24, in the King James version, it says the apostles ask about the end of the world. But in other translations, they asked about the end of the age. So they know the age is ending. And that kind of makes more sense too. Like they understand this stuff too. So the age is ending. And perhaps the maps in this, with this theory working, the maps literally would be different, because in a different age, then you would have more land exposed that was not exposed before the age, right? Because the sun's circle would be moving, so the maps literally would change, because the habitable Earth would be changed. There'd be ice ages in certain places, and new worlds would be open to be explored.
Yeah, it explains the ice age. And the different things that's been found in the ice. Everyone thinks it's a comet that came and froze the whole world. Well, why couldn't it have just been, the natural circuit moving through the ages? And we're in a place that was once ice, and we will again be in a place that is ice now. They found structures, these creatures, and no telling what other kind of creatures they found in Antarctica's ice as it's melting. We talked about, we memed up this photo last time we talked about it. I can't remember the jokes that were said, but they were funny.
These are as accurate as the satellite pictures as we.
Yeah, there we go. Yep, this is real footage, guys.
Yeah, that literally looks realer than some of the satellites pictures they present to us.
Absolutely. Yep, that's the landline going to the moon right there. So here he is, the sick globe that they want you to feel like you live on. It's all your fault, right? We're putting our carbon footprint. We move around too much. We drive cars too much. We aerosol too much. We breathe too much, fart too much, all that stuff. So now our world is sick because of us, and it's climate change, right? And they're profiting off of this, of course. And then, of course, you've got the extra land people who, give us maps like this and maps like this that I wanted to resonate with. I wanted to believe, because it made a lot of sense for extraterrestrials, things from other lands and different things like that. And Admiral Byrd's confession, his idea of finding beyond the South Pole, he said he found land the size of the United States. Now, this, though, we don't really have much evidence that could point toward this other than that testimony. But the map that we've been talking about, here's the pieces of evidence that I found. And this is based on the narrative. But I want to tell you guys something. When it comes to the narrative, see right now, if we're in the EA or AE map, right? If we're just the regular flat Earth map, then if some of this stuff becomes irrefutable, like the magnetic pole moving, right, and shifting, see, they can say this now, and we can say, oh, well, no, it's not. Prove it. But then over time, if they do have evidence for this, now I know that the North Pole is just as regulated as the South. Right. And some people even think, well, I think there's so much talk about Antarctica because they don't want you to know what they're hiding in the North Pole, you know, and you said earlier, you know, they've wiped it off of maps. It's a blank space, you know, it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, but given the narrative, it says, yes, Earth's magnetic North Pole is gradually shifting and moving northwest. Now that's strange to me. How could north itself move north? Is it folding within itself? But when you look at the clock in Prague, when you look at the map that we've been talking about, I have to go all the way back. But if this is moving northwest, it can't move its own north, but it would be moving west like this. But then it could also be moving north compared to the center piece of this map. And there's some places in Antarctica, they say, that when you go there, your compass starts flipping as if it's fighting between two North Poles, right? It starts
Mm-hmm.
spinning. Now, it would not do that on a bar magnet. They say that the Earth is. It says we got North Pole, South Pole. That's it. No, it would stay directly the way it should. You know, it wouldn't start spinning, but it does. So, if the narrative's true, then what it would do is it would try to debunk the flat Earth map that we believe now. If all these things are happening, because then they can say, oh, it's a pole shift. Oh, it's global warming. Oh, Polaris is now moving all of a sudden, which is another part of the narrative. They say, yes, Polaris, also known as the North Star, does move slightly as the Earth's North Pole moves, which means also the magnetic field is moving. Because if the North moves, then the whole field has to move with it. The field that we know, the magnetic field. Now, as of now, since our known history, Polaris is lined up where it always has been.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's 400,000 miles away, or we don't know how far the stars are, we just know they're not trillions of light years. Well, right now, let's see, what did it say about the North Pole? In 1831, Arctic explorer James Clark Ross first located the magnetic North Pole. As of early 2019, it was moving from Canada towards Siberia at a rate of about 34 miles a year. The NOAA predicts that in 2024, this year, the magnetic North Pole will be located at 86 degrees north, 142 degrees east, and by 2025, it will have drifted to 138 degrees east. The speed, though, it says magnetic North Pole forward speed has increased over time from about 10 miles a year to about 34 miles per year. So this is within the century. So in the last century, it's sped up like 20 miles per hour, if this is true. And Polaris would have to be moving along with it, maybe, or not. You know, we could be moving into a whole new set of stars, like you mentioned last time we talked. You know, maybe
Mm-hmm.
just the sun and moon are moving. So the Sahara Desert, this was a big one. This hit me hard. The Sahara Desert has been expanding by more than 7,600 square kilometers per year over the past century. Now, south is where it's moving. So if you look back at that map and you look at the tropic that the sun is on, well, that's exactly what would be happening. See, this direct sunlight here is causing the Sahara Desert. They got it kind of colored lighter yellow here. And this is South Africa moving south, right? And the tip of Africa there is getting the other tropic. But right here, the direct sunlight would be increasing this way, meaning the desert would be growing to the south if that were moving like they say it is. So already the narrative is lining up with this map. But could you see how they could use these facts if they become 100% verified? I mean, they're already right there on Google, but we don't trust everything Google says. But I think the best way to sell a lie is to sandwich it between two truths anyway. So
Yeah,
I'm sure
it's like it's something they need to explain, and I do think I think this explains it way better than they do, because that we're told, like, during these certain times of human civilization, there became ice ages and massive climate change, when they're telling us they had copper chisels or whatever. I mean, they maybe had bones and rocks strapped to sticks. Like they didn't even have a wheel back in them days. But this makes sense that like the world as we know it really only matters where we're at and where the sun moves. So as it was fascinating, if you believe in the global model, what they'll tell you is 90% of the population of the world lives in the northern hemisphere. So there's only 10% supposedly live south of the equator in their model. So the difference between the variance in the sun moving in over a certain plane of the earth more often, for all intents and purposes, it's getting way hotter for us because the sun is moving over more where more of the people are. And you think about it, it's getting colder based on places like in the southern hemisphere, like possibly like South, was it South America looked like it was kind of based on that map. That could be getting colder at the southern part.
Yeah, it is. Right here. Chile experienced its coldest May in 74 years due to a series of polar air masses that moved over the continent.
Yeah.
The cold front broke. Yeah, the cold front. The cold front broke records in Santiago and along the coast, with temperatures dropping below 0 Celsius in some areas. Other factors that contribute to cooler conditions in South America include low pressure, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. But yeah, in fact, it is. And this is crazy too, because I asked, when would the Sahara Desert be green again? And they say the cycle is caused by a 41,000 year, probably an inflated number, but a 41,000 year cycle in which the tilt of the earth changes between 22 and 24.5 degrees at present. And it's in a dry period, but it's expected that the Sahara will be completely green again in 15,000 years, probably another inflated number, but still
give or take 1,000 years or two.
Yeah. Because I mean, they know no one's going to live that, the age of information is the greatest deception of all time, because they can throw these inflated numbers out. They can throw anything they want out, that history or future, and inflate it, knowing that, well, no one's lived long enough to see that, so we can lie about history, and then no one's going to live long enough to see this, so we can lie about the future too. But this is, I believe, their explanation for when we do see the cycles moving like we've been talking about. They'll have this. They'll be like, oh, well, that's because it's, we're in a pole shift and it's moving, yada, yada.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. As somebody asked in the chat, they asked a question. So is the land moving? No. So what we're saying is, like, biblically, the earth does not move. The earth is stable. It's like it says repeatedly that the earth does not move. So what we're saying is, though, that what's interesting is I kind of thought about it, like just think about like biblical translations and kind of the language we know. When we see earth in the Bible, we've been ingrained in our head the globe or a planet. So when we hear earth, we think like the whole ball. Even if we have even moved over into biblical cosmology, it's still hard for us to separate the idea that earth is the whole thing. Or just even think of world. So world can be translated as age as well, and often can be interchangeable. But there's different words for it depending on the Hebrew and the Greek. So world is a different word. But earth can just literally mean the dirt in your hand. It could be the land that you're on. So think about that in your head when you say, like, when the Europeans were talking about going to the new world. And even think about like famous Freemasons like Manly P. Hall saying that America is the new Atlantis. It almost makes it sound like that is it possible that what America was, North America was this place that was this advanced civilization, that maybe it was uninhabitable for a certain age. And then as it got changed, they could go to this place. And that's maybe why they discovered all the things there. Like literally there was, it's like North America was like this uninhabitable wasteland, but at some point it changed, and then they went to the new world. Well, now with that concept in your head, think about the future of this place based on that map. As the sun's circuit changes, Certain places get colder, certain places get warmer, and certain places that were literally under ice get exposed. And so that land is exposed. There's new worlds exposed. And maybe the old world, old Earth, is literally uninhabitable now. That place,
Mhm.
parts of the Earth, the greater realm, are experiencing ice ages as new Earth, new worlds are opened up. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know. For some reason, this really resonates
It
with me.
does. It does. And the old maps, you said it earlier, the old maps with undiscoverable, unrecognizable land and, continental drift, even. They say that everything was bunched up in one place and then the continents broke apart and drifted. Maybe that's another explanation for evidence, maybe that people would find of exactly what you're talking about right now. They've got all these different little posts set up around. And this is biblical too, by the way, guys. I mean, the guy who made this map, I don't know who he is or what language, maybe Latin, I don't know. But I mean, he's got scriptures up here. He's got Jesus quoting a scripture, but I don't know what language it is, so I can't translate what that verse is.
Interesting.
But it says Jesus Christ. But he's got Enoch too. It says Henoch, but I think he's trying to say Enoch. I mean, it looks like it.
He-Man.
He-Man. But I think I did actually. I think it was Latin. I think I found out that this scripture one day. I don't know if we could do
I
it
don't
in
think
real
Latin
time or not.
does Latin have J's?
Not sure.
Because I know Latin is an older
Corona.
language, and
Okay.
they didn't invent the J until
Okay,
supposedly.
we got Corona with an R. I wonder who does Corona with a K.
I don't know. It's interesting. I was just thinking though that when they do talk about the kind of the scare tactic of global warming is that the sea levels will rise, and a lot of people have made the point of saying that, okay, so you think about it like this now. So people would say, well, we're talking about these continents like the North Pole, we're told is literally just ice. And so you're saying, okay, go do a science experiment. You fill your cup with ice and water, and if the ice melts, will it overflow or will it not? Obviously, no, it doesn't. It'll be the same exact amount of fluid in the cup. It
or
won't
less.
overflow.
Well, yeah, the water level will go down if anything, because the ice is raising it because it's got all the air bubbles inside. So same with our ice,
right? So, but consider in this model that let's just say there's way more land on where that ice is right now. So if the sun circuit moved over that ice, and that's literally on land, it's literally on Earth. If all that ice started to melt, is it possible that the sea levels would rise? I mean, I guess you'd have to say it seems like based on just what I'm looking at, I would say, yeah, right?
Probably because the ice wall that we have right now is what 1,000 feet in some places above the water line. So as high up as the ice.
Well, they're saying it's in some. I mean, they're saying they said the average height of Antarctica was 2,160 meters. I mean, obviously that's based
above
on it being
level?
on top of land. So that's like that's a mile high.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, so I don't know how long. We don't know what the natural elevation of the land is, but if it's typical to most places, yeah, that's a lot of ice.
That would be enough ice for sure. I mean, if it's that many feet and that much land, I mean, look how much ice is here just compared to that melted territory. I mean, all together, yeah. I mean, and what I want to know is what raises it to that level, to where it's that tall. Antarctica is so tall. It's like it would make no sense anywhere else that just got cold. The elevation, I wouldn't think would be that high unless it was, divine intervention, or
You
it
know
was
what? It
supposed to
makes
be
sense to me.
that
I
way.
just thought about it. Like, so why would the wall be so high? Okay, just
Uh-huh.
think about like if the sun's going over this area and it's freezing, and it's like it's as it goes by there, it melts it and it drips down, and it's you know what I mean. Like you could imagine how the sun would continue to drip down, and it would look like a wall instead of you know what I'm saying. Like as it can,
Yeah,
it would kind of flatten it out, and it would continue to drip upon itself until it got tall.
you're right. You're right. It is. It's like a slow but steady waterfall all
Mm-hmm.
around, one
Yeah.
way or the other. One, it's a freezing waterfall on one half. The other, it's a slowly dripping waterfall on the other half. That makes
Mm-hmm.
total sense. And you're right. It's the exact shape it would be if that were the case. So we got a couple other interesting things. We're going to go down kind of a different path. Um, this video. So this is a guy I follow on YouTube. His name's Barry Stepp, and he just covers a plethora, a lot of paranormal. He covers some things, but he featured this theory on his show, and I noticed a comment from somebody. It said, "Holy crap! The four quarters Earth guy, the whatever circle, square, circle, and cross is a Hopi symbol left by the Pahana white brother in the beginning of time. That symbol and the swastika, oldest peace symbol, was left to identify them. Pahana, when they returned to America, they disappeared shortly after leaving the symbols. That makes perfect sense," he said. But when I read that comment, it didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, what? Who? Where? I've never heard of this. So I did a little research. Of course, I looked into the swastika, which, yeah, it means sun in some places. It means peace in others. It means good luck and prosperity in different languages. It means different things in different places. But if it's a symbol for the sun, I had went back and looked at that map and kind of zoomed in. And did you see all those? Like right
Yeah.
here, right
Yeah.
here, right
Yeah.
here,
Mm-hmm.
right here, right there. Could that be like an area where the tropic hits? I don't know. But it's just funny that that was there. But I looked into it further, and this Pahana people, there's an interesting thing about them. They left this behind, this little uh, hieroglyph, and it has one of those symbols in a sun. It's got this guy. I couldn't quite make anything of it, so I read into it. It says, right here's the interpretation. It says the large human figure on the left is the Great Spirit. The bow in his left hand represents his instructions to the Hopi to lay down their weapons. The vertical line to the right of the Great Spirit is a time scale in thousands of years. The point at which the Great Spirit touches the line is the time of his return. The life path established by the Great Spirit divides into the lower, narrow path of continuous life in harmony with nature and the wide upper road of white man's significant or scientific achievements. The bar between the paths above the cross is the coming of white men. The cross is that of Christianity. The circle below the cross represents the continuous path of life. The four small human figures on the upper road represent, on one level, the past three worlds and the present on another level. The figures indicate that some of the Hopi will travel the white man's path, having been seduced by its glamour. The two circles on the lower path of life are the great shaking of the earth.
Mm.
So that made me think of Hebrews 12, 28 to the end. I think it's got 30. But remind me of that. God said, I once shook the earth, and this time I will shake both the heavens and the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, how do you shake the earth? A flood, right? So you're
Right.
talking about the raising water levels, talking about this Hopi people. We're talking about the past three worlds and the current one. So the passing away of worlds, shaking the heavens and the earth. We were talking about the sun and moon moving. It's just weird how all that stuff's lining up. So I found this article. by Lloyd Allen Packerson. Strange, right? That's where I found that symbol. That's where I found all these things. But this thing was connected to climate change. This whole prophecy of these people, the climate guys picked it up, and they're like, "Oh, this means severe climate change, right?" And this guy right here, he's an ex NASA climate scientist. This guy right here, uh, James E. Hansen, right? So he was with these people, and they're from the Vatican, by the way. So it was this global Catholic climate movement, is what it was called.
And they're keeping an eye on that with their Lucifer telescope.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this guy, NASA, I was watching one of his seminars just to kind of see what all he's talking about. And here he is. Look what he's talking about. He's talking about the Antarctic ice sheet, the Greenland ice sheet. So he's talking about the melting and freezing of the ice caps. So we talked about this seed of life pattern. Someone had brought that up to me. The seven, they have these 7 circles in them. And this is kind of like, it's weird because it's a full circle. I went ahead and layered it over this, but it's a full circle with 7 circles in between and then 1 circle in the center. So it's like goes around and into the center. Now this is from Second Enoch, which I haven't even read Second Enoch because I've read the first, and the people who recommended it to me said that 2 and 3 aren't. I probably shouldn't even waste my time on it because it's not legit. So I haven't. But this is from Second Enoch, and I just found it to be interesting because it says, "And I have the command, let there be taken some of the light and some of the darkness. And I said, become thickened and be wrapped around with light. And I spread it out, and it became water." So ice, it sounds to me like ice turned into water.
That sound like ice, yeah.
"And I spread it out above the darkness, below the light. And thus I made the solid waters, that is to say, the bottomless, and I made a foundation of light around the water. And I created 7 great circles inside it, and I gave them an appearance of crystal, wet and dry, that is to say, glass and ice, and to be the circuit for water and the other elements. And I pointed out to each one of them his route, to the 7 stars, each one of them in his own heaven, so that they might travel accordingly. And I saw how good it was." So it made me think of the seed of life. It made me think of that. And then talking about the circuit and made the water solid. And to me, that just sounds like that map. So here's that verse I was talking about. Yeah, it's 27 through 29, or 26 through 29. Hebrews 12, I believe. "Once again, I will shake not only the earth, but the heavens also. This means that all of creation will be shaken and removed, so that only unshakable things will remain. Since we are receiving a kingdom that is unshakable, let us be thankful and please God by worshiping him with holy fear and awe, for our God is a devouring fire." So if you think about it, in this map, there is one section of land that's unshakable. There's one section of land, in fact, as this goes around, that will always have sunlight, and it'll always be inhabitable, no matter what. If all things pass away, there's one place that won't, and it's in the center here. It's in this section. So if that's Mount Meru, or Mount the Black Mountain, it'll never pass away.
I was thinking too, when you were saying about the compass going crazy when you got to a certain part of the world. So what if this is the case, is that there is a toroidal field in the center of the sun and the moon circuit, but it mentions in the book of Revelation that there's a place where God's people is New Jerusalem that is further away, and there's no need of a sun because Jesus is the sun. Now consider that maybe there's a toroidal field there too. Because again, we don't know how big the whole realm of the earth is. And obviously we're saying there's a magnetic north where it controls where our circuit is. But yeah, then there's the true north, the center of the whole realm, and that's where the Lord is. And you think about it like this, that I thought it's interesting that New Jerusalem, the description in specifically in Revelation, I know other parts of the Bible, but it talks about outside of where God is, there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Again, think about it. So that there is a place outside of where our sun would be, everything would be dark unless you had a different light source and a different source of warmth. Obviously, with new resurrected bodies, we might not need the heat, but obviously, I'm sure, just based on what we know is good, light is good. God said light is good, so we would want to be a place where there was light. I think that's really interesting. I think that to me that makes a lot of sense. It makes sense perfectly to me,
dude. And he created the light. You said it earlier. He created the light before the sun and moon. So it is there. And I do believe that, man, it keeps hitting me in my spirit that heaven's a physical place, man. It's like this, but it's where we don't have to deal with the silly things of life that we have to deal with now, the inconveniences, the downs, a glorified body. I keep thinking about that and what that means. And it's like, I imagine not just us in our prime, but us without the toxins of this world.
You broke up. I don't know if you broke up for the chat.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry, it broke up on my end.
Oh, I was just saying, I think of the glorified body and I think of, a body that never had to deal with the hard metals, soft metals, the toxins that are in our foods, the poisons, the parasites, and all these things. And, and I believe that there is that place, New Jerusalem existing right now. And, you think of the spiral of life. Do you almost think that it's everywhere? The Fibonacci sequence, which they credit it to him, to Fibonacci, but he didn't create this sequence. He discovered it.
No.
He discovered it in nature. He saw God's pattern in things, and it's always a spiral. The spiral of life, the spiral of things, and it's everywhere. Even we are a little spiral. We're born and we untwist out of this seed. Our fingerprint is a spiral. Galaxies, we're not quite sure what those are, but they are up there and they are spirals. I believe stars I think they're angels, man, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, biblically, I would agree with you. I think that's a dimensional thing that's hard for us to wrap our minds around, but I think that what we see of them is just light. And we don't really know it. I mean, again, like when you try to use a powerful telescope, you really can't see what they are other than they literally are like, like the whole twinkle, twinkle little star. It's a diamond in the sky. It literally shines like a diamond. And I believe that because they're on a higher dimension than us, they can interact as they want to with us. But yeah, so I think the Bible calls the angels stars. I'm going to call them stars.
Yep. And that Revelation 9, I can't remember what verse exactly, but says a star fell from heaven and he was given the key to the bottomless pit. So they're referred to as
9-1.
At he's and then the sun and moon, I think they're referred to as they have pronouns, or whatever. But
I know that there's a verse in Isaiah when it's saying like that the sun and the moon will be put to shame, and it's like it's clearly talking about them like they're more than just just balls of gas and rock and all that stuff. It literally says that they're going to be put under the Lord and under his judgment.
Absolutely. Hey, that's the end of my slides. I'm going to stop sharing those for now. Am I cool to run to the restroom for like 1 second? I'll just take a.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and do that, man. I'll see what the chat thinks. Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. I'll be right back.
I can usually talk in fill some time.
Absolutely. I'll be right back.
Okay, all right. You're good. So y'all, what do you think of that presentation? Do you think that there's some validity to this? Did this make sense? I think it makes way too much sense for it to be. It seems like a crazy theory, but I think it makes perfect sense. The Fibonacci sequence is the fingerprint of God, our creator. Yeah, I think that it makes sense in the way that the repeating pattern of creation, I've mentioned this many times before, that biblically God spoke the world into existence, all of creation into existence. There's obviously a frequency, a vibrational sound of God's voice and the things he was saying that literally created the things. So it actually makes perfect sense that there would be some kind of a pattern in his voice. I believe the Fibonacci pattern is the pattern in his voice. So it's a fingerprint. It's the sound of his voice. I think it's pretty cool. I think all this stuff. I do think that, man, once you accept biblical cosmology, like I said, a whole new world opens up, and I think this is what we're talking about. Yep. When we get glorified bodies, the podcast will never have to have restroom breaks. It'll be
That's exactly what I was going to say when I got back. I was like, oh man, I could really go for a glorified body right now. No bathrooms.
So as we talk about the other possibilities, well, I know we were riffing on this before. What makes sense to me is the concept that we often say as biblical earthers, we would say there's no such thing as outer space. Okay, let me give you a caveat to that. I don't believe that there's this empty place where there's just floating and there's nothing but dark matter and whatever else garbage they talk about. But there's a space where we're at. There's an inhabitable world that we live on. Everything outside of that plane would be, like I said, it'd be surrounded by ice. If you went outside of that, you literally are talking about exploring a place that's dark, that's cold. They always talk about how space is black and it's cold, right? They often say that. And then so you think about it, planet, like the very definition of it would be like a plane, like another plane outside of here. So there would be planets that could be explored. And if you look at some of the maps, you see different names of them, with like some of them are named like Mars, right? Have you seen that on these maps?
Yeah.
Dude, so I'm talking about. So, go ahead.
When you said planet, because that's like an et is a smaller one, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So the plane is the big one. A planet is our known land, our little planet.
Yeah.
Because it's little. Dude, you're onto something.
Yeah. So then you have, again, extraterrestrial, extra terrain. There's terrain that's outside of here. And so if, like, when you see the arcing of the rockets, is it possible that they literally were going across the plane of the Earth to other unexplored places? And if everything would make sense, because it almost makes more sense to me that works, because I'm not saying the whole thing isn't a complete psyop and they're just doing nothing and they're shooting rockets into the ocean. That's probably true in some extent, but they probably are exploring other places. And with a biblical mindset, that there is eventually going to be judgment on this place too. That what if the elites, they always talk about trying to find a different planet because one day this place is going to be uninhabitable. What if they really are trying to look for a place that's still on the plane, the same plane as us, but they're literally searching for an inhabitable world? It makes so much more sense in this theory, because there was a dumb movie I remember on Netflix. It was called Titan. Have you ever seen that?
Mm-mm.
So it's, it's like, obviously it's one of these dystopian futures where like Earth is, a crap hole, and it's like they're going to have to move. So they're trying to look at the next place that's possibly inhabitable. So the moon of Saturn is Titan. It's like it's huge. It's supposedly the biggest moon out of all the moons, out of all the other planets and all that stuff. The point being is like, that seems so stupid. Like the idea that they're going to send some rocket ship up to some other place and they're going to colonize it and build on and do all of the, like, it makes a little bit of sense. I'm not saying it makes sense, but I'm saying it makes a little bit of sense if it literally was just across an ice plain, and there literally was land like this. We know that there's oxygen. We know that there's lots of other things that make it, inhabitable. But like obviously talk about being a shot in the dark. Literally, we're going to just send some rocket up and we're just going to go up to like a different planet, which doesn't have an atmosphere, or does. And it's like, it could be poison gas, whatever they say.
Yeah, dude. And they say Earth is going to be uninhabitable.
Right.
While Mars, over time, our sun is going to make it inhabitable. So
is the science saying that the way that gravity and all that stuff is working is going to make Mars more, like warmer or something? Whatever. I don't know if it's warmer, it's cold.
Yeah, currently they say that our Earth is going to be engulfed basically by the sun, is what they say. And we're going to have to move to Mars. We're going to have to inhabit Mars because it's going to be the next closest place in the Goldilocks. They say it once had water and probably will again, type of thing. And we can colonize it and all of this. But like, I had this theory a while back with the colonization of Mars. I thought to myself, well, they could just load a bunch of people in rockets with no windows, make them all feel like they're shuttling off. And, well, originally my theory was just, a catastrophe like the Challenger again. We just, it was an emergency leaving Earth and we sent but mixing with what you just said, they could totally deceive people into launching off into one of these known lands and them thinking they went to another planet. But with, Elon Musk is the one doing all that. But last time we talked about how the artificial sun, the sun simulator that they're making, could be more for exploration and travel than just to be an artificial sun. They could be using it to carry along and warm up the area enough for them to explore into the barren wastelands. Someone mentioned that to me. I brought it up last week, but I mean, that's a viable theory if this moon map is indeed true. I could see them, using that. Or maybe they got some stationed already, and maybe the rich are already living. I know some people think that possibly those lands are already being used. So I don't know. I'm open to really any possibility with it.
So Leaving Babylon made a point. It made a point in the chat. She said that. So, isn't it interesting how the Border Patrol is called ICE agents? Yeah.
What? Yeah, dude. They are.
That's pretty funny, right?
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, like, you think that's a coincidence?
That's wild.
We don't believe in coincidences like that. But to go into a little season point to talk about getting completely nuts is, what if it's the militaries of the world, they're talking about strategically, they were talking about World War III being in the North Pole, which again, the North at some point would go to, like, again, we're talking about on a flat plane, there's north, and then eventually you can go further north on this plane because the center is not the north. There's further north than that. If we're just talking about going straight up, there's parts of the North Pole you couldn't go. And they're talking about the World War III being fought around the Arctic. What if they literally what if they discovered where, like, New Jerusalem was, and the armies of the world were literally going out there thinking they had a chance to destroy it? And like, that's straight up Gog Magog,
Yeah.
the battle,
Yeah.
the battle after the little season or at the end of the little season. If that's what they were trying to do, they literally going to go try to shoot that thing out of the sky with their nukes and all the stuff that they got.
Yeah. Could be. Remember
I
that
mean,
old footage
what's that?
of Russia's old footage of the North Pole?
I don't
It
think
was
if I
just a
ever, I don't know
black
if I've ever
hole.
seen it. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Oh man, it's like it's super hard to find, but it was Russia supposedly was doing an low Earth orbit thing, and it was supposedly the North, and it looked like a vortex.
Oh, I think I
just
have seen that. Yeah.
going into a black nothing hole. But like New Jerusalem could be levitating over that point or something, or they blacked out where it is or something like that. You know what I mean? It's and that could be why the North is so regulated.
Well, again, like I said, it's funny because if you think about, like, obviously we're still trying. It's still hard for us to separate from what we've been taught, like that Antarctica's in the south and the North Pole's in the north. But on a flat plane, north, like Antarctica would be further north than the North Pole, right? Because it would be a wall that's around the whole realm. And so there's certain parts that you can't go to, and there's certain parts that you can. So obviously it would depend on, but yeah, they wouldn't want you to get past where you go, because again, the jig is up when you find out, if you continue to go north, eventually you go past the North Pole and you'll get to another place that is a wall of ice. It's 2,160 meters tall, a mile high.
Right. I'm going to ask what part of Antarctica does your compass start flipping? Because if it's only known to do that in one region in the narrative, compasses can behave strange near the South Pole because Earth has both geographic and magnetic poles. See, that's different. See, I hadn't heard it put like that before. It has both geographic and magnetic poles, and the magnetic pole is currently located in the Southern Ocean, 1,800 miles from geographic South Pole. This means that if you were to use a compass near the South Pole, it would point you in almost the opposite direction to the geographic South Pole. This difference is called declination, and it's currently 140 degrees. So further than anyone can go.
Mm-hmm.
But see, I'm wondering, on the map we've been looking at, it would really only be in one region. Well, a general area, because it wouldn't be fighting with that true north, the true north that we're talking about, unless it were close to that one. Like, I feel like if it was back around this way, it would just probably fail to work anymore, or just stay doing as usual. But like that true north you're talking about. Now, when you're thinking north and south and stuff, are you thinking the center of the whole map, ice and all, the center of that?
Well, yeah,
or
what
you
I'm
thinking
saying
even
is
above that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that, like, as far as if you're just looking, if you got a compass northwest, east, and south, you have them all on the map, then you have your well, like right here. So if you have, so this is your North Pole right here, right in the middle, right here in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the South Pole down here, but here's the South Pole too. I mean, or this is Antarctica. It's all the way around it. So you'd have to go. You could go further north, and it would still be based on the model we're talking about.
Yeah.
So that's why they would say certain places in the Antarctic are off limits, and it's literally not. It's not south. It's north, because it literally goes around the whole circle.
Right. And some really hardcore flat Earth people have been like, man, steer clear from this theory. It doesn't work. The flat Earth map, there's nothing wrong with it. It's what works. This one doesn't. But the deal with that is this theory that we're talking about today doesn't take from the original flat Earth that everyone is researching.
Right.
It takes from it not at all. And the only time that it'll never take from it. The narrative wants to take from it, I believe. And whenever those things start unfolding, like we talked about, the pole shifts, climate change, ice age, when all that stuff starts becoming irrefutable, if it does, then we have an answer. We have something now that it explains it much better. It could be something that they plan on the AE map being debunked with. You know, they may say, oh, well, this is how we know that the Earth is not flat, is because it has to be a ball because the pole shift, because of climate change, all this stuff. So it's like, I think people just have a hard time grasping, which I think we've explained it pretty good today on how it works. I don't know if they thought maybe, I don't know what they think when I presented it, but our known world is just, it's going to work the same way it has every single day. It's just when we start noticing the pole moving or whatever, the sun and moon's what's moving around. The land stays firm. It stays the same place. And I don't know if people thought maybe continental, it's drifting with it or what, but no, it's firm. It stays. The sun and moon would move around over time. And what I found was sad about it is, like, if there are people, like, you know, do you believe that angels live here in the bodies of man?
No, I don't think that well, I mean, I would say that biblically it says in Hebrews, it says obviously, be kind to strangers, because you could be entertaining angels unaware. I think that, yeah, I mean, so biblically I would say that, yeah, there's people that could be angels that we just don't notice them. It's funny, in the Bible though, it typically shows when angels show up, people know that they're angels somehow. You know, like they must have been superior to people that they could tell. Maybe they're gleaming. Maybe there's something special about them. Maybe it's like in the Twilight movies where they're sparkly in the sun.
Yeah.
I don't know, but somehow they knew, they call them men, but they always kind of knew that they were something more than men. So, but yeah.
So if they've been here forever and live forever, I would imagine that they move around with it. You know, some people that I've seen as they have to be a fallen, like, there's some people that I just think are fallen angels, just because it's like, you know, there's those actors who can just play every role. It's like they know people and characters so well that they can just be anybody they want. You know what I mean? And it's just, it's strange to me that there are people that are that good at it. You know, I was watching, like Johnny Depp and people like that who just know roles so well.
I think he's channeling.
You know,
I think he's channeling spirits. I think, yeah, that's
probably
him playing the muse when he's doing.
Yeah, it's got to be something like that. Yeah, dude, it's weird. And
Yeah.
Tom Cruise, I was watching Tom Cruise, the Mission Impossible movies. You know, well, okay, so I was one of the youth leaders at youth camp this year. It was called Mission Spiritual Intelligence, and it was called it was a Mission Impossible themed, but it was called spiritual or artificial intelligence versus spiritual intelligence. Well, we had a drama, a play, and it was based on Mission Impossible, and I was Ethan Hunt, and the whole idea was we had this Mission Impossible codex, and it was a drive, but it was the Holy Spirit. The whole thing was based around the Bible, but it was, to teach Bible stories to kids, and it was fun. But anyway, so I wanted to watch, the Mission Impossible movies and get an idea of Ethan Hunt and his character and stuff. So we watched all the Mission Impossibles, and I'm watching those movies, and I'm watching Tom Cruise in his scenes, and I'm like, this guy he doesn't even seem like a regular human being. Like, for some reason, he's playing parts so well, like his acting and the way he looks at people and shows genuine love in his eyes looking at someone and things like that. It's just so awkward to me. I'm like, that person seems like they've been here for thousands of years watching watching humans, and they just copy them. You know? Yeah, I don't
Well, you
know.
know what they
This is
say, you know what they call Los Angeles, right?
yeah.
It's the city of angels.
Uh-huh.
The city of angels. You know, I was thinking too that in this model too, what is interesting. So think about fallen angels, and they left their first estate. So it kind of implies that they cannot go back to heaven. You know, I mean, that's like the way I read it. And I know obviously in Revelation 12, when the devil gets cast down to earth, he cannot come back. I think at that point, he cannot go back and forth. He's stuck there. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because the devil has been thrown down with great wrath, and he's in great wrath. So that concept, though, think about it. So we could not live outside the circuit of the sun, but I'm sure that they could. So they could probably live inside the earth, and they could probably live outside the earth, if you get what I'm saying. Like outside, like here, here.
Mm-hmm.
And so think about like what they show you in the movies. Superman, his name is Kal-El, which basically translates into light god. Okay, so Kal-El, where's his fortress of solitude? It's at the North Pole. So you think who's going to mess with Superman up there? Nobody, because it's too cold for regular people. But obviously, it's not too cold for Superman, because he's a god amongst men. You know, so if you really think about it, it's like, is that kind of what they're showing you, that it kind of makes sense that if they were going outside this place, and maybe that is where they could literally be being, because maybe there's a point where God said, no, you cannot interact with, just think about even like after Jesus is given authority of this place, he's like, you guys cannot come back into these lands. But maybe they could run it almost like in the way that a mob boss could run like the streets while he's in jail through his demons. The demons are going back and forth, and they're literally, doing the will of their masters, their fathers, and then they're kind of running the things through there. And literally you could have some of the fallen outside, the inhabitable places. And maybe that's another reason they would want to get there.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned Superman. You and I both, I think, have made videos on this before, that Lucifer's trying to tell his story through Superman, but he's trying to rewrite it and make it to where he wins, basically. So he falls to this earth, and he's a god at this earth, but where he comes from, he wasn't anything special.
No,
and
he wasn't.
Compared to what he is here. So he falls here, and he's got all this whatever power. And then General Zod, wants to bring new Krypton and new Earth down to this realm. And Lucifer wants to stop him.
It's almost like General God.
Yeah. Bringing the new heaven and new earth down. That's literally what he does in the movie Man of Steel, or what he wants to do. And I see that all the time, Lucifer telling his story again. Everything that you see is the king of, like king of rock and roll, king of pop, king of whatever it is, the king of. Lucifer's telling his story in that person. If you pay attention, like Michael Jackson, none of them have relationships with their father. Their father doubted them. Their father abused them. Their father was mad. Their father neglected them, whatever they're the king of in this world, they have the same story. You notice that?
Yeah, well, I just made me think of all the Disney movies where the parents always die.
Yeah.
Wild. Like that is a constant theme in Disney movies, that the parents are always dead, and it's always about this movie about discovering themselves and being true to who they are, following their dreams, and it always works out happily ever after, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's wild.
Oh yeah, somebody mentioned again. Yeah, who else lives in a place that we can't go? Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Santa Claus also lives in a place with his elves, and they're doing all kinds of weird things there. Playing reindeer games and stuff.
Making toys for people.
Yeah,
the good boys and girls.
Making the holly that's supposed to be about Jesus, which we obviously, you guys know my feelings on that. But it's obviously distracts about the time for the season, whatever you want to say. It's like, it is sort of interesting, like that those kind of memes play out in places that are too cold for us to go, and we could never know. And it's like, and we kind of basically have to think about it. I think we mentioned last time too, the Transformers movie, the very first one. Megatron falls to Earth, and he's in the Arctic, and that he's discovered in the late 19th century. Of course, it had to be in the 18th century or 19th century, the 1800s. He's discovered. He's put under the Hoover Dam. He is reverse engineered, and that's where all the technology from the 21st century and the 20th century comes from. Is from him. And it's funny too. Like, we looked at that map that had literally the black cube on it. What is it? The black, was it the black sun on there?
Yeah.
That movie's about, you have the Allspark. The Allspark is a cube that can either create or it can destroy. And Megatron, much like Metatron from the Book of Enoch, is like an angel of death. He's like the most powerful angel. And that's like literally what they're showing you. So they find him. Like I said, it's almost even the way that if what the concept, what we're saying is true, we think about the days of Noah. So where was the circuit of the sun in relation to where we are now? Obviously, that would have been way long ago. Like, that would have been, even based on the time we know, that would have been 2 ages prior to this one. So you could imagine the circuit of the sun would have been drastically different. We all, I did that movie Ancient Aliens or Ancient Angels with Brian, and we always talk about the technology that it took to build the pyramids, or all kinds of megaliths that are, when you have 1,000,000-pound stones and all that kind of stuff, like insane stuff. Okay, so what if that the circuit has shifted back toward the time it was when the days of Noah were around, and that possibly the sun could be melting technology that's well preserved because it was under ice, like a Megatron. And that is where that's why technology could have rapidly progressed, because they literally did discover new things in frozen lands, or once frozen lands.
Absolutely, could be.
I mean, that's what
they tell us a lot in movies.
Isn't that what Admiral Byrd was saying? So we've talked about this on the podcast before, and I think eventually I'll have to do a whole show on this. So Admiral Byrd, he's given pretty well documented TV interviews where he was saying that there's this unexplored lands as big as the United States beyond the South Pole. Okay, so for whatever that's worth, and he does not sound a hint of crazy. He says he believes it's a land of great resources, coal, oil. He even speculates that it has uranium, right? Right?
He said everything, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he was saying that it had
resources.
Yeah, it had all kinds of resources. But then you get into his journal. So he had this diary that was probably released after post-mortem. And it's the most insane thing you've ever heard. It's talking about like the bad German spaceships with swastikas on them and doing all the weird. He's meeting with the masters of the inner earth and all that, like almost like the masters of the universe, like He-Man and stuff. He's meeting with these people. All this craziness is happening. Now, what was interesting, I'm not sure if it was the journal or it was one of his things. He went to a place where he said he went past the ice and there was like, he saw a woolly mammoth. He got to a place where it was warmer and there was greenery. And then I know my buddy Max Powers, who has Parasite TV. He did a video on Antarctica, and there's video of Antarctica that's not under ice, like back in like the 40s or whatever. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They were showing parts of it. So maybe that is around the times they made those treaties, that's when the lands they literally were going to explore more lands that we could not get to.
We should find out what area that's at, what area of Antarctica. Because if it, I bet you it's in the place where it's, now freezing, or, vice versa. But I was going to say to people real quick, lands that are named today. You know, even from the Bible days, which they know this because they watch you, and I know you've mentioned this before, but they could have changed the names of the lands. You know, even from Bible days to today, if we don't see actual maps from that time, labeled the names of certain things, and compare it to a map today, you know, they could have changed. There could even be everything could be messed up for all we know. You know, from the Bible to today, there could be lands that and cultures, people that they've, you know, like tribe of Judah, you know, things like that. They could have inverted certain things as far as locations and place and things like that, to where purposefully just to mix us up, I feel like.
Oh, well, yeah, definitely. Okay, I had to finish what you're going to say. Sorry.
I was going to say New Zealand, you know, that's a example right there. I mean, New Zealand it's more recently named, wasn't it?
Let me ask you a
New
question.
Zealand?
If that's called New Zealand, where's Zealand?
Yeah. Good question.
Right?
Yeah, where is Zealand?
Yeah, is there a Zealand?
Is there a York? There's a York too, right?
I think York would be somewhere over in jolly old England. I think there is a York. There's a York over there. So yeah, it makes sense. There would be a New York. There's a New England. Where is Zealand? That's a
good question. New Zealand wasn't even. I mean, when did it start? When did New Zealand get discovered? It's relatively new.
Well, what was Australia called before it was called Australia? Because I think it was that like New Holland or something like that? I think didn't they have the territory? Yeah, because it used to be called something different as well. Which is funny. I always have to mock. I always have to bag on this. Is that people literally think that we are named after Amerigano Vespucci when there is not one continent in the world named after a man. Like, and we're supposed to believe that they named 2 continents after some guy's first name. It's not even really his first name. What? Seriously?
Yeah.
And everyone just went with it. And they said, that's cool. he wasn't really first because there's people already there. And also there was Columbus first, but let's just name it this guy's first name. All right, cool.
Yeah. That does not make any sense. And it says New Zealand was discovered 1840, and Antarctica, they say, wasn't discovered till 1820. That doesn't make any sense either.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a lie. It's obviously a lie. I mean, it makes no sense that there was the cartographers over the years were obviously they did pretty decent jobs. And obviously there's weird maps. Lots of them could be they got the general ideas what the continents look like. Now, what I find fascinating, again, to go back to what I was saying about the lost history of flat Earth, when you see that the tropics are mislabeled based on the times of the astronomical age we live in, well, that would make you believe that maybe that's why they're not showing you the accurate maps of those times. Because, yeah, if they showed you a map from, 200 AD and it had Antarctica on there, well, there goes your narrative right out the window. Mm-hmm. But also, you think about when people talk about Pangia, they think about the continents all being as one. Well, for one, what if there was a circuit of the sun that only went over one giant landmass? And maybe it was a different landmass. Maybe it was more like Asia and Africa together. And the circuit of the sun was different. And as far as we're concerned, that if it was Asia, Africa, and Europe together, and that's really only where the sun went, well, isn't that sort of like Pangia? If you discounted the other across the ocean stuff, I think it's also possible that, again, as you were saying, could they be lying to us about, the locations we're at? Absolutely. And that kind of plays into the idea of when I say, I believe that the book of Revelation in large part has been fulfilled, all the prophecies in it, not all of them. I still believe we're in Satan's short season. We're waiting for Gog Magog. But people ask me, oh, well, it talks about the islands being moved out of their places, the mountains being removed, and all these other kind of like wild, geological things that are happening. Well, you only say that it hasn't happened for sure because you're saying, well, the maps are like I've always seen them. They say that nothing's changed. But again, the maps are different. And it's very possible that, that God could have altered the topography on the earth. And how would we know other than just believing what we're told?
Yeah. And burnings. So I wanted to look this up because my big thing when I first heard the little season thing, I was like, but wouldn't there be writings and things? But think of all the book burnings that were taking place around the time they were burning witches at the stake and all these other things. Information was being burned, collected and burned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you ask, just asking Google during book burnings, and maps included. This is what got me on this train of thought was the maps. Like there are probably tons of maps that just got burned too and have been just removed and destroyed. But it says I asked during book burnings, what were burned? That's just basic. I'm going to throw in history in a second and see what it says. But the Google answer was the initial books burned were those of Karl Marx and Karl Kautsky, but came to include very many authors, including Albert Einstein, Helen Keller writers in French and English, and effectively any book incompatible with Nazi ideology.
Oh yeah,
So
sure.
I'm gonna be
So they burned all the books they teach at every college in America constantly. Yeah,
right.
Sure, Google. That stuff's really been suppressed these days, hasn't it?
Yeah, right. I'm gonna write in history and see if it changes the answer. Okay, here we go. Throughout history, books have been burned for a variety of reasons, including as a form of cultural genocide to symbolize intolerance or to purify literature. It says not Nazi book burnings. Okay, so Nazi students
Ease up on the N word. I think we get in trouble for. I don't know if we get demonetized for that.
Yahtzee.
We say the bad German book burning.
Oh yeah, the bad Germans burned over 25,000 books in 34 German university towns and cities as propaganda spectacle and symbolized intolerance. The books were considered un-German and represented ideologies opposed to da-da-da. So then down here, King Jehoiakim of Judah in the 7th century BCE, King Jehoiakim burned parts of a scroll written by
he burned from Jeremiah, sent him the scroll and he burned it. Yeah. And then Jeremiah read it again.
At the dictation of prophet Jeremiah. Yep. Roman authorities in the 5th century, Roman authorities burned Etruscan books of cult and divination known as Eruska Disciplina, and then Iranian forces. So they only gave, I asked in history what books were burned, and they only gave me just three or four very mainstream topics, but we both know a lot more.
What about what you ought to look up what they say about the burning of the Library of Alexandria? What do you think was in those books? Because that was, in Egypt, that there supposedly was this famous library that had, obviously tons of knowledge. And I would say that, again, I don't believe that knowledge was lost. Obviously it was hidden, so I don't think that the Romans would not have burned down a library if they didn't have copies of the books, or they wouldn't have took the best books at it.
This looks like it had some really valuable stuff in it.
Oh yeah.
That's the mainstream narrative says original Greek manuscripts, translations, and works from Egypt and Hebrew scripture. The library was established in 283 BCE and grew under the. So it says that, but yeah, could be the books about, could have been all kinds of things. But see, the weirdest thing to me about this history is that we've got these crazy structures. We've got the strange technological boom, and we have all this stuff, but it's not that long ago that we didn't have electricity. You know what I mean? Supposedly. But then we have these giant structures and these what turn out to be kind of like superconductors for electricity itself, you know, and strange technologies and things like that. And it's like, it's getting to a point now where it's going to be hard for the public education system to keep telling the same narrative. I was talking to ChatGPT, which I'm so against AI, man. It's out of this world, but I like cornering it, and I like using it against itself and getting it to admit biblical truth and all kinds of things. But I cornered it earlier today, and I did this a while back too, but I ask it, out of all the information that you have, out of all the data that you've collected and received, what do you believe is the likelihood of the universe that we live in to be intelligently designed? And it said close to 100%. Out of the data that I have, it is close to 100% likely that we live in a intelligently designed universe. So I start poking around and asking it, what types of things. So it brings up quantum physics, wave particle duality, the observer effect, different things that science has discovered that points toward intelligent design. So I asked it, well, why then do public schools teach what the databases have collected to be 100%, almost 100% truth? Why would they teach what doesn't make sense? Why would they teach random occurrences creating life when that makes no sense when it comes to the data? And of course, it starts giving me the roundabout. Well, basically, what it said in the yeah, pretty much. But basically, what it concluded was that this was a social thing, philosophical and social choice. So it's not that it makes more sense, but it's that the people who put it in the system have power, and that's what they wanted. So if we did narrow it down, the world should know by now that atheism is just off the table.
Yeah, possible.
The people who created atheism, or at least the philosophers that atheism is attributed to or contributed to, that atheism wasn't even created by atheists. The people who come up with ideas that turned into anti-deity ideology, those people were religious people. They believed in something. So it's just strange to me that, and I know I kind of went, but it all wraps up to, the whole thing is an anti-God agenda through burning books, burning maps, changing names of things. They're trying to get us so far off of the scent in hopes that we'll never figure out the truth. And I feel like we're at a point now that it seems as if, I don't know, I like to be optimistic, but I feel like we're at a tipping point where all of that is going to, it's teetering right now. And you can see they've got bots, they've got anti-God propagandists, they got the media, the news, and all that stuff. They fight so hard to keep this lie up, but you can feel it and see it teetering to the point where now, once it falls over, it's no longer going to make sense to anyone. They're going to realize that the majority of us are fooled. We're being lied to. It's getting so hard now to keep it concealed that I really do feel like we're on the turning of a tide where they can't conceal it anymore. No matter how many AI bots, no matter how many paid accounts, paid media, paid news, and all that stuff, I don't think they can conceal it much longer. to be honest with you.
No, I'm gonna agree with you. I think that it's funny. Even today, I got flagged on Instagram. It's like it's been a while since I got flagged for disinformation. I did a video about the mud flood and and like the old world buildings and stuff. And it's obviously like everybody knows if you see one of these videos like that, it's presented by like this is my best guess of what happened. So to say it's misinformation. But I was asking that question specifically on TikTok Live like a couple weeks ago, saying how long before because I mentioned something about the New World Order or something like that in one of these videos, and I literally got the tag on YouTube for they put it up on my YouTube video. Okay, so now the further we get into talking about these different topics, they're going to be verboten. Like we're not going to be able to talk about them freely because people who are in the truther community, they're going to do things to either ban you, demonetize you, all the above. And so I think that there is a tipping point, because as we were talking about this concept of possibly a changing of the circuits and this changing the world, like literally the world we live in, they have an answer for it. But like, again, that makes sense because they have to have some kind of science to explain certain things. When we can explain it in a different kind of way, I think eventually I've mentioned this. I'm always optimistic. I believe that there's an awakening, but I know that in this world it doesn't always end up perfect, right? So I know that in the next life it is perfect. So I do think that the main part is like that as we continue to wake people up from the matrix, that there is hope at the end of this. And I think that that's really like, we don't win against the robber barons and all this kind of stuff by like becoming them. We win by freeing people, their minds, their spirits, and then denying ourselves and understanding, that Jesus is going to sort this all out in his own time. And I do think that I think it's awesome. I think that these conversations like this are fascinating because it really is like, gosh, I got the idea that we could have a conversation about the one we just had today, and I could be saying, dang, this makes so much sense. Like the idea that I could have a conversation like that, like just 2 years ago, I'd have been like, wait, what now? So the earth is flat and there's a wall of ice and then there's land on the other side of it. Like that sounds so insane, but it sounds way more logical than what we've been taught in school when you actually realize it.
Yeah. And anybody new to this and new to, just this truth movement and seeking of the truth and trying to find it, and if you feel like being like JT or me and creating content of your own and trying to help spread it, I want to encourage you to do so, definitely. But like also know that starting out, they're going to try to discourage you. Like when we started out, I'm sure JT can contest to this too. They would hide your views. They would make it feel like you were doing it for no reason. Like, and they would send so many people after you to where it's like, make you want to cower down and be like, man, if this is how people's going to treat me, like, I don't like being treated like this every day, but it's all just divisive from the enemy. And even just if you're not creating content, if you're just going to be a part of the discussion in comment sections and places and be a voice, that's one cool thing about social media is protests are kind of obsolete now, because that was all about finding a platform, being heard, and getting out where the most eyes can see and hear your point. Well, now you don't have to have a picket fence and a mob of people. You've got social media and the internet and stuff now, which is super cool. But there will be like this discouraging spirit. Satan hates us, guys, and he sends his demons after us to try to discourage us, make us feel broke down and useless, and like we're not really helping spread the word, we're not really getting it out. But all that's all that's a lie. There are lives being changed every single day. I believe that a new person wakes up a little bit more each day, and new people are kind of coming across this and this conspiracy world. I'll tell you, doing this kind of stuff, I've actually seen more people come to Christ through this movement than anywhere else. The True Earth, the Giants, the hidden history stuff. I've seen more people believe in God over this kind of thing than in anywhere else, because they start to see like, okay, wow, and get closer with God. Look, it brought me closer to God because it brought the Word of God alive in a very tangible and literal way, where I'm like, okay, things aren't just so metaphorical and it's just allegory and it's just, oh yeah, the Bible says this, but science, type of attitude and mindset. It pushed that aside for me to where I'm like, oh, there's literally a firmament above us, and literally cannot be moved. And and it shed the light on these scientists and these people who study and practice the religion of science. It just shed the level of deception that they have. You were talking about the outer space thing, and I think about that, the endless void that they talk about. It's like that model is an inversion of everything the Bible says.
Yeah,
the Bible's like, there's waters above. Satan says, no, there's nothing there. There's nothing above. It's emptiness and dark matter and a void. And God says there's a firmament. God says, everything that God does say about the creation, about the earth, there's an inversion that Satan tries to say and do. And to me, like, once people see that, that's brought more people, in my opinion, that I've seen personally, to God than really anything else. So like, that's a part of, I look at it as a part of ministry, man.
Definitely.
Spreading the truth is a part of ministry. It's a part of bringing people closer to God, exposing the evils, because you get those claws out of you, and you start finding all the other claws that are in you that you didn't know were there. It's like you get the major claws out, and then it's like, oh no. So the earth, I see, is like the last domino almost. It's just like, so you knock that one over, and then it's just like cascading. You're like, oh, subliminal messages in movies and TV and music, food and the poisons that they put in that stuff, and it just goes, education system, the too broke and too busy to start a revolution system out here of work versus sleep ratio, like just everywhere.
Oh
So it's
yeah,
like,
for sure. I think it's. Oh, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think for most people, when they come around to biblical cosmology, you're pretty much like, I think that's probably why I said, I think to me, I went from biblical cosmology, and not too long was I open to the short season, because I was like, okay, so if they're willing to lie about that, then there's really no lie that's too big for them to lie about. And then that's when you really start to think, you really do have to at least approach topics with that mindset of like, that they would lie about everything, and really think about that. But I do think, like what you're saying, I think it's awesome. I think that talking about what's true, or trying to find out what's true, should lead people to Jesus if they're open to it. And I think that, as you're saying, I actually had a really encouraging message today on somebody on Twitter, and I'm for sure that person's listening now, but they mentioned that they were encouraged by some of the podcasts we did, and they were going to start making content. And I was always like, I'm always like so encouraging of that people, because I really do think of it like, being fruitful, like that, we'll be known by our fruit, and obviously the treasures in heaven, the things we do. And you think about like the soil that had understanding, the good soil, it produced 20, 30, 60, 100 fold of fruit. And how could you produce more fruit by, instead, like almost like kind of replicating yourself? Obviously, I'm not saying I should be the model that you should try to replicate, but if I'm reaching a big audience now, and I encourage somebody else who does that, I mean, like, well, how much more could I do than that? Like, all the seeds getting planted and the things, and the encouraging thing for anybody who would want to do any of the stuff we're doing. We started somewhere. It was rough at the beginning, it's probably still rough depending on who you ask. You don't really like the content we make, but you get better at it. You don't, you got to start somewhere. And I think the coolest part about it is like, it is when you start out doing it for not a big audience, you're just doing it for God. Right. So like, so like, that's the good thing. You can sleep well at night knowing you did everything you could. And God, like nobody comes to Jesus unless the Father draws them. So you always remember, it's like you can plant a seed, the seed might grow. You might not even ever know. And I do think that that's the coolest thing, that through this, I've been able to meet lots of cool people like yourself and people in the chat, like the community we've created here. And yeah, I would just encourage people just to know what's true, and just don't be afraid to say it. And if you got things on your mind, you got things that blew your mind, things that woke you up, I think one of the most powerful things really is just your testimony. Like I think that makes you relatable. It makes everybody understand that, hey, maybe I'm like sound like the person he's describing before he took that step out there. And yeah, I would just encourage people, because I said I was nervous the first time I made a video. It was one of the best decisions I ever made, because I wouldn't be here if I didn't.
And I'm kind of starstruck, man. Being here with you, I mean, you following me was a big deal to me, because like I'd known you way before I started making content. Like I'd seen you around some of the places that I followed, and I'd see you pop up with doing really cool videos, man. And you were definitely one of the people that I had to look up to with, because I mean, at the time you started, I mean, when did you start?
My first, basically the very beginning of 2022, but I made like a couple of videos right before, like in December of 2021. And yeah, pretty much like, it was kind of like a fake it till you make it kind of moment. And on TikTok, it was just like, you make a video and people like it, and then you make more. And then you do it more, and then you see cool videos. I want my video to look like that. And then you want to research because you want to go viral, and I mean, I was interested anyways, but I mean, I do think that, like, yeah, it's really not that, I mean, I wouldn't say it's not that hard. It's just, it really is. Like, I think the hardest part about it is like, it's like the first step out the door. It's the first step out in faith. It's the first thing you're going to say in front of a camera, knowing you'll probably get laughed at by certain people. But guess what? I get laughed at by a lot of people. I get called stupid all the time. But I don't care. Like at some point you're going to get a lot more pats on the back than you're going to get, dirt kicked in your face. And
yeah.
And it wouldn't be, like I said, if at the same time, if it was real easy, everyone would be doing it. And they think, and some people think that like we were born on third base because you got a certain amount of followers. Like it wasn't always like that. That's why I said, I always think that, I think to me, the encouraging part I would tell anybody is that when you go viral, when you have a big account, it can be easy to make videos. Well, if you don't, then you're definitely, like I said, you're doing it for the right reasons. And so now I have to, where like you get into the place where you actually do well, that you actually have to check your intentions all the time of like, am I doing this for vanity? Am I doing this because I like the attention? Am I doing this because obviously the answer is yes at times, because you like affirmation of things you did. You like people to enjoy the stuff you made. And if you do enjoy it too much, that's kind of like Jesus saying, well, you have your reward now. You've got your reward, because if that's why you're doing it, you have your reward right now. You get to enjoy it right now, but you don't get the next one that's way better. So if you always remember, like the person he's saying, like the one who's giving to get attention, the one who's praying so that everyone will hear them.
Yeah.
Their reward is the attention. And the person who doesn't even let the other hand see when you gave that person money, that person is getting the eternal reward. And I think I do think that that's what I always encourage people that's why you really want to do.
That's good. That's true too. Because I gotta check myself now and then, and we all do. Because it's like we'll make a video or a thought. Like sometimes we'll catch ourselves at the thought of like, oh, that video will get a lot of, but it's
Mhm.
like, you know, was that the first thought? Sometimes it's like, oh, that'll get a lot of views, but then it's like, hey, this video will encourage a lot of people. And like, I've made videos that if I were to go through them, I could probably sit with you, be honest with you and myself, and be like, that one I might have made just to, but it's like a daily thing, and I try to center myself there too, and try to get to the point where I'm like, always doing the right thing for the right reasons, and putting things out there to encourage people and to help them learn something or help them wake up in some sort of way. But like, I love that you referred to was that Matthew,
Oh gosh.
Jesus's teaching on prayer.
Yeah, I think that's right around the time when he's saying don't repeat empty phrases like the pagans do, and don't do
Yep.
this, and don't wear all the tassels. So you can't wear too many tassels on your outfits to get lots of attention for that. No, I
Yeah.
mean
Yeah.
it's fun to talk about this because I do think that we all have to do this, and it's easy to get a big head and you think you're so great. When especially it's funny, like that once you start making videos like this, some people have help from the algorithm. They're really not very good at making videos, and they have 1 million followers. So it's like it
Mhm.
really is, and I think that we will justify it sometimes. We'll go after that hot topic to try to poke the algorithm and maybe get
Yeah.
we're gonna make videos about stuff we don't really want to sometimes to like because we want to grow the account so then eventually we can lead them back to Jesus. But then sometimes I
Mhm.
remember thinking this early on is I knew which videos that worked for a while, especially when I was the algorithm was working, and there was topics on my mind, on my heart about Jesus that I needed to talk about. And when I make those videos, those videos would get no movement. And I remember thinking
Mhm.
like there would be a point where I thought maybe I should just do more conspiracy stuff and I could talk about Jesus in a different way. But then I said, you know what? No, I can't do that. And I remember thought if I ever stop making videos only like I stop making those videos, then I really am doing it for the wrong reasons. And so
Mhm.
I really do feel like that like it's easy, because I guarantee you, if you start hashtag Bible study, the video's not going to do good. But I'll do it anyways, just because. And hopefully, like God, like I know God knows why you did it. And like I
Yeah.
said, the
Yeah.
why is always more important than the what. And I think that's why, like sometimes we can make videos and we can be wrong. I think if we did it for the right reasons, I think that God has grace for us in those
Yeah.
scenarios versus when your intentions might not have been good just because you were trying to do a thing. But anyways, we should
I
probably close
absolutely
it out
agree.
here. So let me give you the last
Yeah.
word. Seven Club. You got any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna really, that was kind of my closing thought to people was, be encouraged and know that if you are new getting into this, there is definitely an algorithm that's against you, and you'll kind of see the more mindless stuff getting all the attention and all the hype, and all the people like us getting made fun of and getting discouraged. But just have encouragement, keep moving forward, and keep spreading the truth. I think all the lies are basically to hide the ultimate truth, which is Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, no matter what they are, in some way, shape, or form, the lie is trying to hide Christ. I mean, all of them. The earth, the hiding the giants, all of them. Because if the Bible's true as a history book, then the story of Jesus Christ is true and our
Yep.
salvation is true. So they don't want you to know that. And that, and keep looking into things. And if you guys get new information, definitely show us, and we can put our heads together and try to figure out more about this. I wish I'd have wrote down the couple points that you'd made, JT, about um, what was it? Oh, the Antarctica.
Don't
Um,
worry, we'll save this live stream.
that's
We
right.
should have
That's true.
timestamped some of the stuff.
I'm gonna look back because I want to check some of those things to see if it lines up with this motion too, because that'll just be a couple more proofs to throw into the bucket.
Yeah. All right. And everybody where they can find you at. I know I already included his on YouTube, which I said I was trying to encourage him more to start putting more stuff on YouTube, because I think you're good with the long form stuff. Obviously, you go live on TikTok all the time. Do more long form stuff, and but he's also on TikTok, and I'll be sure to put his link down there where he does a lot of short videos. I know a lot of people are not quite fans of TikTok, but I would encourage you to still check it out, because there's lots of good Christians on there and content creators on there. So
cool. Yeah. Thank you for having me, JT. And I'll try to put if I didn't stream this straight to my YouTube, but I'm gonna try to get it put on there. And then I'll also, in my description, I'll put JT. Oh, go look at my last video. I actually shouted you out in my my Parasites or Demons video and put your link there too. So
okay, excellent.
His link's there. I'm probably going to stream this once it's uploaded. I'm going to probably stream it live onto my channel, so then people.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. Well, anyways, guys, we appreciate you all. You guys were, like I said, this might have been my best stream I've ever had. I'm not sure. We had over 400 people in the chat for good long portion. So you guys have been incredible tonight. Man. Yeah. We love you guys dearly. Obviously, God bless all y'all. Yeah,
dang,
man.
that was awesome, man.
Yeah, that was like, so we had the peak at 409.